All right, so this is the shipping container that our Woodland Mills sawmill came in. And I've been trying to figure out what to do with this thing for a couple years. And so now I've decided I'm just gonna cut it up and use it to practice my welding. So let's get us a piece of this. All right, so we'll go in and sand that up, and this will be some good practice welding material. Okay, so I'm just stripping the paint off these to clean it up. One of the big problems that I've had with my learning to weld is metal prep, and I've just never taken the time to do it the way I really should. So I'm trying to get better on that as well. Okay, we'll let that cool and hit the edges, and we're ready to do a little practice welding. Everybody, we're gonna do some practice welding today. So I've got some pieces of scrap steel, and I'm just gonna cut up a few little pieces so we can practice some butt welds, some T-joints, and also some lap joints. So I'm gonna cut these off, and we'll get it going. Okay, so now that I've got my little pieces and I've cleaned them, which again, that's probably my biggest downfall in welding, is that I've not usually cleaned the metal good enough. So I'm just gonna put together a couple little things to practice on. I come up with a T here. There we go. That'll be a nice T-joint. Got just a joint together. We'll do a butt, or we'll go this way and do a nice little butt joint, and then we'll just do like a lap joint. So we'll practice with these. One thing that I want to do is I'm still not happy with the wire feed on this, so I'm going to play with that a little bit more. And I'm going to change out the wire. I actually had some Harbor Freight wire in this welder, and I'm going to go ahead and change it out for some Hobart 0.030 solid wire. So we'll be doing that. Okay, so let's change out this wire real quick. And you want to be careful of that. Like I said, I'm basically going to trash this anyway, but I should have stuck it through this hole right there. So pull that spool off. And again, this was some Chicago welding, so it's just some Harbor Freight. It was the right size, but this has been on here. I've had this welder probably 8 years, and this has been on there that whole time. So like I said, I'm just now kind of have the time to kind of play with this a little more. I've done some little trailer repairs that I've had to do, but basically this is where I'm going to try to gain some welding skills. Okay, and we'll take this wire now that we've cut it out of the torch. Snip this end off. There we go. Okay, so we've got the old wire out. All right, so I had several comments that said I should check the liner as well. So I think I'll try and pull that out and clean it off. Okay, so we'll take, to get the liner out, we'll take our torch off. So there's our electrical connection. Okay, now to pull the torch out, we loosen the thumb screw and it just pulls out. And here's the end of our liner. So on this, we'll take the tip adapter out. Okay, and we see the other end of the liner. And so what I'm going to do is take an air compressor and blow air through here and see if we get any gunk out this end. Okay, so I'm going to take this air gun and shoot air through the liner, and then we're going to look and see if any crud comes out that we can see on that paper towel. I've only ever used solid wire on this, so it shouldn't have any flux material, but we'll just see because it's not feeding well. Here we go. Oh yeah. So look at that dust and crud that came out of there, and that easily could have been what was keeping us from feeding smoothly. Okay, that's probably good. So I'm gonna put this back together and see if it works. The liners for these are about $25, so I'll throw one of those in if this doesn't, but I think this might work. Okay, we got so much crud out of that liner that there's a lot of dust and stuff in this machine as well. So I'm just gonna blow all this out also so that we don't just end up repeating the problem. Okay, that should help. And if it doesn't, we'll always say it should have. So our O-rings look good, and that's so that we can get our gas down the pipe. But we'll go ahead and slide this in. And when it goes in, it's gonna go through this block, and then it's gonna go until that seats all the way up against it. So like that is not fully seated, we'll just go a little bit farther. Okay, and it's now fully seated, and we'll tighten our thumb screw up. The next point is to plug in our electrical. And on that, it has a little detent that it'll only plug in one way. Okay, so that's set up. We'll put our new roll of wire in, and we'll be good. And when you put this wire in, it needs to feed off the bottom, so it's more in line with that. Okay, as you unwrap this, you want to make sure that you don't end up having all this wire come spooling off like we had when we took the other roll off. And there's our wire. It's tucked into a hole there. And it wraps that way, so it's going to go on this spool just like this. And then I'll pull this piece off. I'm going to grab it with my pliers, actually. Then I shouldn't be able to lose it. Okay. And that was a mistake. Let me put that back in there. Or you want to hold that? Just hold that for me. Okay, so we've got our washer. Here's our spring. And then we'll put our nut on here. And we'll just tighten this down enough that this spool doesn't want to free spool and unwind. Okay, let me do another little bit. You don't want this too tight. You don't want it to be where it can't unwind. So that's just about perfect. Now what we'll do is cut off our wire here so we can feed it into the machine. Okay, and it's going to go through the wind mechanism. And on this wheel does 30.030 wire. We've got solid wire, so we want the smooth roll. This one is knurled here, and that's for flux core, so it can grip it without crushing that flux core wire. And we're going to slide it into our liner. There it is. Okay, now then, what I'll do is put this down, put some tension on it, and then we'll feed it through the machine. Okay, so now what we'll do is I have the gas off, but I'll turn the welder on and we'll just spool this wire through the machine. And on this, if you turn your wire speed up, you don't have to wait so long. And we're spooling, but we're not bird's nesting when it lets off. And we've got all of our tips off the end of this. And there's our wire. So now we'll reassemble our MIG gun, and our nozzle adapter goes on first. Oops. You have to actually go through the hole here, not one of the gas holes, gas ports. And make sure you don't cross thread it. Okay, so there's our tip adapter. We'll put our tip on next. And this doesn't have to be super, super tight, but just grab it with your MIG pliers and give it a little snug down. Now what we'll do is, I've got this anti-spatter compound, and we'll put a little bit of that on. So here's some Hobart nozzle gel, and that's supposed to be good to keep that tip of your MIG gun clean. And it's basically like a petroleum jelly, but we'll just put some of that on. You want to make sure that you don't clog up your gas holes, your gas ports. So we'll put that on. That'll just keep that from, if it arcs back or whatever, it keeps it a little bit cleaner, less spatter. Okay, and then our nozzle here, we'll put a little bit of that in there. I'm gonna use my pinky. Finger won't fit in there. And we'll just slather some on the outside too. Okay, and then our nozzle just goes back. Now, once you start welding and this gets hot, you can just simply dip that in the end and it'll liquefy and cover everything it needs to do. So that's a pretty good tip that I also learned after my last video, people helped me out with. So appreciate the tip on that. Now I'm gonna go ahead and set the tension, and I've got it actually set to where I believe it should be, but we'll try it out. Remember to turn your wire speed back down. I had it all the way as high as it would go just to run it through this, I think it's about 15 feet of hose there. So turn it on. Now with it against wood, we'll just see if it curls. And what we're looking for is that to curl up. So that should be good. And a nice curl like that on your welding angle is exactly where the tension needs to be. If you have it too tight, I was told that it could bird's nest inside here. So you do want it to slip a little bit, like if you tried to drive it straight into that wood. We'll see if that does anything. Okay, so I'm gonna push this straight down, and I'm gonna watch the wheel over here and see if it does slip. Okay, and it did. It started slipping, and so that's what I was told, was basically you don't want it to drive into the wood. And so watch, this wheel will slip. Okay, and it'll still curl up. So I think that's perfect tension on this, and it's about 2.5, which is where it's been the entire time I've owned this. So I'm real happy with the feed now. Thanks for the tips on my last video. I think I've got this totally worked out, so let's practice doing some welding. I definitely appreciate the tips everybody gave me, and I'll tell you what, blowing out that liner, I think made all the difference, because I was still having feed issues, and it appears that I'm not now. So I'm gonna get ready to do some practice welding. One of the things, I've got this polypropylene sweatshirt on, and I'm gonna change that out to all cotton. This would definitely melt if it got sparks on it. So, like I said, trying to be as safe as I can, trying to learn the process, and I appreciate you guys following along. Here's our little pieces that we're gonna practice on. And on our chart here, it's not quite an 1/8 inch, but it's bigger than 16 gauge. But if we look down here, and we're using, it's steel, and we're gonna use 115 volts, and we're using 0.03 wire. So it's saying 625, and if it was actually 630, if it was 16 gauge, if it was 1/8 inch, it'd be 750. So we'll look over here, and we don't have a 6.5, but I'll put it on 6, and we'll start at 630, And then if that doesn't seem to stick and stuff, we can always turn the wire speed up a little bit. If we have to choose another voltage, we'll have to go to 7. But we'll start off with 630, and that's based on the 16 gauge steel with 115 volts, which is here, and then the 0.030 wire. So 630. So try that out. Our gas, we'll get it turned on. Okay, and then I'll dial my regulator up to 30, which is cubic feet per minute. Okay, and this is a setting I've always used. Somebody told me to try that out and use it. So I've always had pretty good luck with it, except for when I tried to weld outside in the wind, and that didn't work so good. All right, so the other new thing I've added is a little welding cap. So I was tired of my bald spot showing every time I tried to weld. So I've got my little, I heard people call these coupons. So anyway, I don't know, my little pieces of steel. They're cleaned, which is a new thing for me, and we're set up. So let me get my gloves on. We'll turn our welder on. And the important thing on this, before you just start running a bead, is we have to tack these in, is what I've been told. So, okay, so I'll get this tacked up. That worked pretty well, and I'll tack the other side. Let's see what we've got. Okay, so can you see that good? So we've got it tacked. That should keep it from distorting when I end up welding that bead. So let me take my magnet off now. I don't think I need it. On these, this is another important thing. They said you want to see the heat signature through on the opposite sides. So we've got good heat signature on both sides of that tack, and I think that'll hold it up. So let me go ahead and run a bead along here, and we'll try and set you up with an arc shock. Okay, so I'm going to do a drag weld right along there, and I'm going to shoot right into the corner of that. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. So it looks like where I first started, well, you can feel the heat coming off that. I might have went a little slow, but where I first started, I didn't quite get all the way to the edge. And I think that's just a product of seeing. I had a piece turn so that you guys could see it. And then that kind of limited my vision of it. But you can see a good heat signature on the backside. So you can see the heat came through, and I think that did pretty good. I was a little worried about if that would shove this piece around, and it didn't, so that was pretty good. So looking at the end, I think that looks like a pretty dang good weld for me. So let's try the other side of it, just for more practice. Okay, so I'll do a drag weld on the opposite side of that. And I think on this one, I'll try to go up and down a little bit. The first one I just went totally straight in the corner. Can you see? Get my angles right. Well, I think the first one looked better, but that did get the little angles. It looks like it didn't quite. I got down in the bottom piece good here and at the beginning. in the middle, and it was simply because I was practicing going up and down. I've never done that before. So let me use this to hold it because that is just smoking hot. But right through there, it looks pretty good. So this is actually the second weld I've done on any kind of metal this thick. So I'm pretty happy with that. And I'll bet that won't come apart easily. I'm happy with the wire feed speed and also the voltage. So I think that's pretty good. So let's try a lap joint. I have to be careful I don't weld my pieces to the table. So we'll just do a lap joint here. Welding this one. Actually, what I'll do, I think, I'll slide this like that. That'll give me more practice. Slide that up under there. So I'll weld this as a lap joint. I'll cut off my wire. The thing with this is if you put the cutter's on this side, so if you put this side against your torch, it comes out to just about the perfect length. Okay, and on this one, I think I'll just try and go straight this time. And I'll go left to right this time. I've been going right to left. Okay. So I'll get all set up, get my angle right. Oh, need to tack it first, that's right. Okay, so there's my 2 tacks, and now I'll do the weld. Okay, so for a lap weld, and what I'm looking at here is I didn't quite start it right. I started here instead of on the end, so I started kind of the end of the tack. But that time I did kind of like a cursive E all the way along there, and I'm pretty happy with the way that looks. So for a lap weld, like I said, that's not bad at all, I don't think, for a beginner hobbyist welder. You can see on the end there, you can kind of see it's got good penetration. It's pretty good. And I can flip this over just for practice and I'll do the backside. So let's try that out. Okay, so I'm gonna do another lap joint, and I think I kind of like those cursive E's, so I'm gonna try that again. And just for practice, I'm gonna tack each side even though it's already been welded, so it's not gonna come apart. I kind of missed the, missed the piece right there. Okay, that's a little long, but I'm gonna go ahead and tack it with that. Okay, so I got 2 tack welds, and I haven't welded my piece to the table. So now I'm gonna go through with the cursive E and weld them. Okay, and I'm gonna try to start on the edge. I've been starting off the edge a little bit. Okay, so I'll tell you what, I'm not going to celebrate too much, but man, I'm really impressed with myself on these welds. So I've been watching a bunch of tips and tricks and learning everything from everybody that's watched our videos and gave me tips. And for a lap weld, that's pretty good, I think. So like I said, of course, having a good welder helps, but I did that cursive E and I really like those things. Like I said, it's not stacking dimes probably, but you can definitely see the serrations in that weld, and that ain't going nowhere. Okay, so there's our lap joint. We did our T joint. Let's try a butt joint. And does anybody have any trouble sticking their welding to their table? Because I had that a little bit. The first tack I started came off. Okay, well, I got my little grinder. I can sand that off.
It could be that your best weld is the weld to the table itself.
Oh, now, come on. Okay, So the last thing we'll do, I don't know why I'm wearing gloves to touch these, they're not hot. Let's go ahead and we'll do a butt weld right here. That table actually is pretty hot. And I'll leave about an 1/8 of an inch gap there. And again, I'll tack each side of it so it doesn't pull away or warp in any way, hopefully. Again, cutting the wire off. You can see that anti-splatter that I put on there, that's kind of that, it's wet looking, but look at that tip. That tip's looking clean, and I'm sure that anti-spatter's helping that. Okay, so let me throw a couple of tacks right here. Okay, and those are a little fat, but now I'll do a weld. I'm going to go from the top down. I probably went too slow there. That looks like it's awfully hot. And that's one of the things that they said is if you go too slow, plus there's an awful lot of weld there. So, and look how wide that heat signature is versus like the heat signature on this lap joint. So I went way too slow for the amount of heat that we've got there. So that's not a good one really, but it didn't warp, it's still straight. And you know, with a grinder, what do they say, a grinder and paint makes me the welder I ain't. Okay, so let me prop this up a little bit and I'll do the backside, and I'm gonna go quicker. I got watching the puddle too much and enjoying myself, and I just went a little too slow. Cut this off, and now I'll just go a little quicker. I'm not gonna tack this side because it's welded on the other side. Okay, I think that's a little better. It's not quite as fat. One thing that, well, the heat sinks are still pretty big. I think this is just pretty thin material too when you're welding on the edges. So that's too much weld on there. So maybe I need to turn the wire speed down a little bit for a butt joint like that. But I'm real happy with these. Like I said, my thing is, you know, I'm a hobbyist welder. I love the idea of welding and I want to learn it, and I'm pretty happy with the way these came out. So I've got my welder working perfectly now. The wire feed issues that I was having are gone. So I think both the combination of changing the tip as well as cleaning that liner out were the key to that. And like I said, the cleaning the liner out and or changing the liner are tips that you guys gave me. So I definitely appreciate that. So we're loving it, we're learning, and we appreciate you all for watching. So have a great day and be safe.